My son's new fiancée sat at Sunday lunch and brazenly demanded $2 million for her dream luxury wedding. She thought I'd just hand it over like a typical comfortable dad. Then my son slipped me a note under the table. "Dad, she's a scammer, help." I smiled calmly and said just 2 words that instantly shattered her smug mask and turned her confidence to dust. "My name is Bradley Whitfield. I'm 68 years old and I've spent the last 4 years in what most people would call a comfortable retirement here in Dallas, Texas. Before that, I was an assistant U.S. attorney for 38 years, specializing in financial crimes and fraud cases. I've seen every con imaginable or so, I thought. Turns out the most dangerous ones don't come from strangers on the street. They come to Sunday dinner wearing a designer dress and a practiced smile. That particular Sunday started like any other. Nathan, my son, had invited me to lunch at the French Room in the Adolphus Hotel. The place drips old-world elegance with its crystal chandeliers and mahogany paneling, the kind of restaurant where power brokers close deals over aged steaks and single malt scotch. He'd been dating Diana for about 8 months, and I'll admit I hadn't paid as much attention as I should have. Nathan is 35, a successful project manager at a tech company, and he'd always been careful about relationships. Too careful, maybe. When he finally introduced me to Diana 3 months ago, I was just happy to see him happy. She was striking. I'll give her that. Long, dark hair that caught the light just right, perfect posture like she'd been trained in finishing school. The kind of woman who knows exactly how good she looks and exactly how to use it. Her mother, Angela, joined us for lunch occasionally, a woman in her late 50s with the same calculating eyes as her daughter, though she tried harder to hide it behind a veneer of Southern charm. That Sunday, both women were at the table when I arrived at exactly 1 p.m. The hostess led me through the dining room, past tables of well-dressed couples and business meetings. Nathan looked tense when I approached. I noticed it immediately, the way he kept adjusting his napkin, straightening his silverware, the forced quality of his smile. But I chalked it up to pre-wedding jitters. They'd gotten engaged 2 weeks earlier. Bradley, Diana said, rising slightly from her chair with that brilliant smile. She was wearing what looked like a $2,000 dress in cream silk that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. I'm so glad you could make it. We have some exciting news about the wedding to share. The waiter approached immediately, the kind of attentive service you get at places where lunch can cost $200 per person. I ordered my usual Macallan 18 neat and settled into the plush burgundy leather chair. The ambient noise of the restaurant, quiet conversations, the gentle clink of expensive china created the perfect backdrop for what I expected would be normal wedding planning discussion. Instead, Diana pulled out a leather portfolio and placed it on the white linen tablecloth between us. It was the kind of professional presentation folder lawyers use for closing arguments. Nathan and I have been working with the most amazing wedding planner. She began, her voice taking on a business-like quality that made something in my gut tighten. Heather Johnson from Elite Wedding Designs. She's planned weddings for celebrities, Fortune 500 executives, and we wanted to discuss the investment with you. Investment, not budget, not costs. Investment. We've determined that for the wedding we envision, we'll need $2 million, she continued, opening the portfolio to reveal page after page of glossy photos and typed estimates. The scotch arrived in a heavy crystal tumbler. I took a slow sip, letting the smoky warmth hit my throat while I watched her face. Nathan's hand was white-knuckled around his water glass, and I could see a thin sheen of perspiration on his forehead despite the restaurant's perfect climate control. $2 million, I repeated, keeping my voice neutral. That's quite specific. Oh, it breaks down very precisely, Diana said, warming to her subject. Her eyes had taken on a gleam I'd seen before in deposition rooms when a witness thought they had the perfect story rehearsed. $800,000 for the venue alone. We're looking at the Rosewood Mansion on Turtle Creek for 300 guests, then $400,000 for the floral arrangements and decor. I've always dreamed of having cherry blossoms flown in from Japan, and the ice sculptures will be custom designed by artists from Colorado. She turned a page in the portfolio revealing more photographs, $300,000 for my dress. Vera Wang herself is designing it personally. It's a once-in-a-lifetime piece with hand-sewn pearls and Italian lace that takes 6 months to create. Angela chimed in, then her voice dripping with syrupy sweetness. Our family has certain standards. Bradley, Diana is our only daughter. We want her day to be perfect. $300,000 for catering. Diana continued without missing a beat. We're bringing in a chef from New York who specializes in molecular gastronomy. Each course will be a work of art. And $200,000 for entertainment. We've hired a symphony orchestra and arranged for fireworks that will be visible from downtown Dallas. I glanced at Nathan. His jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscle jumping beneath his skin. Our eyes met for just a second, and in that moment I saw something I hadn't seen since he was a scared 10-year-old who'd broken a neighbor's window with a baseball. Pure panic. $2 million, I said again, setting down my glass with deliberate care. The crystal made a soft clink against the marble tabletop. And you're sharing this budget with me because... Diana's smile didn't waver, but something cold flickered behind those perfectly lined eyes. Well, traditionally, the groom's family contributes significantly to the wedding expenses, and Nathan mentioned that you're comfortable. Comfortable. What a delicate way to assess someone's bank account over Sunday lunch. I'd heard that euphemism before in fraud cases. Scammers never said rich or wealthy. They always said comfortable or well-positioned. I see. I picked up the leather-bound menu, scanning it as if this were any normal Sunday. The prices here were astronomical, minus $65 for a steak, $28 for a Caesar salad. But people paid it for the ambiance, the prestige, the feeling of belonging to an exclusive club. And have you considered what Nathan thinks about this budget? Nathan wants me to be happy, Diana said, her manicured hand sliding across the white tablecloth to cover his. He didn't return the gesture. I noticed, don't you, honey? Nathan opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again like a fish gasping for air. We've discussed that this is important to me. Diana cut him off smoothly, her voice taking on a sharper edge. That if his family truly cares about him, they'll want to see him start his marriage properly, with dignity, with the respect that our union deserves. The threat was subtle, but unmistakable. Support this, or you don't support your son. I'd seen this manipulation tactic in domestic abuse cases: isolate the victim, make them choose between family and the abuser, then punish them for any choice they made. Angela was watching me carefully now, her coffee cup suspended halfway to her lips. Bradley, you seem hesitant. Is there a problem with our daughter's vision for her special day? I was about to respond when I felt something brush against my knee under the table. Nathan's hand passing me something. I palmed it smoothly. A skill I'd learned from watching drug dealers do the same thing in courtrooms for nearly 4 decades. The paper was small, maybe torn from his pocket notebook. Just digesting the information, I said mildly, slipping the note into my jacket pocket. It's a substantial amount to discuss over lunch. Diana leaned back in her chair, and I caught the change in her demeanor. The sweetness was evaporating like morning dew under a harsh sun. I would think that for your only son's wedding, no expense would be too great, but perhaps I'm mistaken about the kind of family Nathan comes from there. It was. The manipulation, crude but effective for most people, attack the family bond. Make it about love and loyalty instead of the absurd amount of money being demanded. Question the father's commitment to his son's happiness. The waiter returned to take our orders. Diana ordered the lobster thermidor, minus $85. Angela chose the Wagyu beef, minus $120. Nathan asked for just a soup, claiming he wasn't hungry. I ordered my usual Sunday special, the prime rib, and asked for another scotch. While we waited for the food, Diana continued her pitch. She talked about vintage Dom Perignon champagne that would cost $500 per bottle, about custom invitations printed on handmade Italian paper, about transportation in vintage Rolls-Royce vehicles for the wedding party. Each detail was meticulously planned, each cost precisely calculated. Under the table, I carefully unfolded the paper Nathan had passed me. Without looking down, I ran my thumb across it, feeling the indentations of pen strokes. Whatever he'd written, he'd pressed hard enough to nearly tear through the paper. I kept my eyes on Diana as she continued talking about ice sculptures and imported flowers, all while my thumb traced the letters Nathan had carved into that small piece of paper. When I'd felt enough to understand the message, my blood went cold, but I've learned something in 38 years of prosecuting criminals. The moment you show your hand is the moment you lose. So I smiled, nodded at appropriate moments, and listened to Diana's increasingly aggressive sales pitch while my mind raced through the implications of what Nathan had just told me. Dad, she's a scammer. Please help. 6 words that changed everything. I looked at my son, really looked at him. The circles under his eyes that I'd dismissed as work stress from his latest software project. The weight he'd lost over the past few months. The way he kept checking his phone with an expression close to dread whenever Diana wasn't watching him. How had I missed the signs? But I knew how. I'd been alone since Nathan's mother passed 11 years ago from breast cancer, and I'd thrown myself into work to avoid the silence of our house. When I retired 4 years ago, I'd filled that void with my hobby of restoring antique legal texts and the occasional consulting work with the DA's office. I'd been so pleased that Nathan had finally found someone after years of failed relationships that I hadn't asked the questions a former federal prosecutor should have asked, like why a 32-year-old woman with no apparent career was living in a luxury apartment in uptown Dallas. Or why every conversation seemed to circle back to money and status symbols, or why Nathan's circle of friends had mysteriously shrunk since he'd started dating her. "You're awfully quiet, Bradley," Angela observed, her tone sharp despite the practiced smile. "We're sharing our dreams with you and you seem distracted." The food arrived then, giving me a moment to compose myself. The prime rib was perfectly prepared, the horseradish sauce sharp enough to clear sinuses, the Yorkshire pudding golden and light, but I barely tasted any of it. I shifted my attention to Angela. Another detail I'd overlooked, the way she choreographed these interactions, always present for important conversations, always managing Diana's presentation. This wasn't a daughter asking her mother for support. This was a business partnership, just thinking I said pleasantly, cutting into my prime rib. The meat was tender, blood red in the center, but my appetite had vanished completely. Diana's eyes narrowed slightly, thinking about what? About the details. What details? Her voice had taken on a defensive edge, all of them. I set down my knife and fork, reached for my scotch. $2 million is a significant sum. I assume you have detailed contracts from all these vendors, signed agreements, proof of the quoted prices. The silence at our table was sudden and complete, like someone had dropped a soundproof dome over us. Around us, the French room continued its elegant Sunday rhythm, conversations about golf, handicaps, and stock portfolios, the gentle scrape of silverware against china, the soft laughter of couples celebrating anniversaries. But at our table, you could have heard a pin drop. Angela recovered first, her southern charm kicking into overdrive. Well, naturally, we're still in the planning stages. Heather works with only the most exclusive vendors, and they prefer to work on trust relationships. So you're asking for $2 million based on estimates. I kept my tone conversational, taking another sip of scotch. No contracts, no guarantees, just ideas and photographs. Diana's cheeks flushed pink beneath her carefully applied makeup. It's not about the paperwork, Bradley. It's about trust. It's about family. When two people love each other. Actually, I interrupted gently. When someone asks me for $2 million, it's absolutely about the paperwork. I could see her recalculating behind those perfectly lined eyes, trying to figure out which approach would work. The sweet fiancé had failed. The righteous daughter wasn't getting traction. Now she was moving toward something else, something more aggressive. "Maybe this was a mistake," she said, her voice trembling just slightly with what I recognized as manufactured emotion. "Maybe Nathan and I should just elope, save everyone the trouble of dealing with." Complications. Nathan's hand jerked toward her, then stopped mid-motion. I saw the conflict playing across his face, the desperate desire to fix this situation, to make everyone happy, even as he'd literally just told me she was scamming him. This was it, the moment where I could let this play out, watch my son make a catastrophic mistake. Or I could do what I'd done for 38 years in federal courtrooms, cut through the lies and force the truth into the light. I smiled. It was the same smile I used to give defense attorneys who thought they were clever, right before I demolished their entire case with one piece of evidence they'd overlooked. "Prove it?" I said. Diana blinked, her mouth opening slightly. "What?" "Prove it. Prove that this wedding actually costs $2 million. Show me detailed estimates from real vendors with real company names and tax identification numbers. Show me signed proposals. Show me anything that demonstrates this isn't just a collection of numbers you pulled out of thin air." Her mouth opened, then closed. Angela's eyes had gone hard as granite. "You have 72 hours, I continued, pulling out my phone and making a show of setting a reminder in my calendar. 3 days to provide documentation for every single dollar you're requesting. If this wedding truly costs $2 million, proving it should be simple." "This is insulting," Angela hissed, her southern charm evaporating like steam. "We come here in good faith, sharing our daughter's dreams, and you treat us like criminals." "This is due diligence," I corrected, my voice still calm and measured. Something I should have done months ago when my son first started talking about expensive gifts and emergency loans. Diana's face went pale. She hadn't expected me to know about the money Nathan had already given her. I stood up slowly, reaching into my wallet and dropping $300 on the table, enough to cover lunch for all of us and a generous tip for the waiter who'd been watching our increasingly tense conversation from a respectful distance. "Nathan," I said, looking directly at my son, "I need to speak with you privately." Diana grabbed his arm with perfectly manicured nails. "Nathan, you don't have to go anywhere with him. We're supposed to be a team now. We're supposed to make decisions together. Yes, I said quietly. My prosecutor voice coming out for the first time that afternoon, he does have to come with me. Because this is my son and I will not watch him be manipulated. Not anymore. Not when I can do something about it. The look Diana gave me then was pure hatred. All pretense finally dropped. Her carefully constructed mask slipped completely, and for just a moment I saw exactly what she was, a predator who'd been cornered and was calculating her escape routes. "This isn't over," she said, her voice low and venomous. "You're absolutely right," I replied. "It's not." I walked out of that restaurant with Nathan behind me, past the crystal chandeliers and mahogany paneling, past the tables of comfortable Dallas society enjoying their Sunday lunch. And for the first time in 4 years of retirement, I felt the old fire burning again. The thrill of the hunt, the pursuit of justice. Someone had tried to con my son and they'd picked the wrong family. The parking attendant brought my car around a black Mercedes sedan that I'd bought to celebrate my retirement. As we drove through downtown Dallas toward my house in Highland Park, Nathan was quiet, staring out the window at the familiar streets. "Dad," he finally said as we pulled into my driveway, "I'm sorry, I should have told you sooner. I should have seen what she was doing." "Don't apologize for being human," I said, turning off the engine. "Apologize for not trusting me enough to ask for help when you needed it." We sat in my study for the next 2 hours, and I watched my son unravel the story of the past 8 months, like he was pulling apart a badly stitched seam. It had started so perfectly, he told me. They'd met at a charity gala. She seemed different, intelligent, cultured, interested in meaningful causes rather than just herself. By the second date, she was asking about his work, where he lived, what I did for a living. He thought she was just getting to know him, making conversation. But I knew better. Those weren't conversation starters. Those were asset assessments disguised as small talk. The 72 hours passed with no documentation from Diana. Instead, she sent Nathan increasingly desperate text messages about needing to secure venues, about losing deposits, about how my behavior was destroying their future together. Each message was calculated to make him feel guilty, to position me as the villain in their love story. But I wasn't sitting idle. I called Trevor Walsh, a private investigator who'd worked several of my federal cases back when I was prosecuting organized crime. "I need background on 2 women," I told him. "Deep background. Financial records, previous relationships, property holdings, the works." Trevor whistled low when I explained the situation. "Wedding scam? That's a new one for me. It's old as time," I corrected, just with a modern twist. While Trevor worked his magic, I hired Vincent Cooper, an attorney who specialized in financial disputes. We'd worked together on several white-collar cases, and I trusted his judgment. "I need someone who can build an airtight case," I told him. "If this goes to court, I want the other side to face criminal charges." The third piece of my team was Keith Rodriguez, a financial analyst who could trace money trails like a bloodhound follows a scent. "Show me the money flow," I told him, sliding Diana's fake wedding budget across his desk. Every vendor, every account, every transaction. Within a week, my team had built a case that would have made the FBI proud. Trevor discovered that Diana Stevens had been engaged 5 times in the past 7 years across Texas. Each engagement had ended 2 to 3 weeks before the wedding date, always after substantial deposits had been paid to vendors who turned out to be either non-existent or completely unconnected to the bride-to-be. Keith's financial analysis was devastating. Of the 15 vendors on Diana's wedding list, 8 didn't exist at all. The bank accounts she'd provided routed to shell companies registered under various names, all connected back to Angela Stevens through shared addresses and phone numbers. Vincent prepared the legal framework while I made calls to the previous victims. Roy Thompson in San Antonio had lost $285,000. Carl Mitchell in Austin was out $320,000. Howard Burke in Houston had been swindled for $410,000. The pattern was identical every time: elaborate wedding plans, vague documentation, money transferred to fake vendors. Then sudden breakups when the groom started asking too many questions. "Let's meet with your wedding coordinator," I told Nathan after our evidence was compiled. "Let's see this $2 million plan in person." The address Diana provided was in the Design District, a modern office building with floor-to-ceiling windows and sleek steel architecture. Suite 140 supposedly housed elite wedding designs. When we arrived with Vincent and our briefcases full of evidence, Diana and Angela were already there. The space was completely empty, not just sparsely furnished, completely bare. Beige carpet, white walls, nothing else, except a folding table and 4 metal chairs that looked like they'd been bought at a hardware store that morning. "Where's Heather?" I asked, looking around the vacant office. "She's running late," Diana stammered. "She texted me this morning that she was moving some furniture to her new location." I set my briefcase on the folding table and opened it. "That's interesting." Because according to the Texas Secretary of State Business Registry, no company called Elite Wedding Designs has ever been registered in Dallas County. And this space has been vacant for 3 months. I laid out the evidence methodically, the way I'd done in federal court for 38 years. Bank records showing the shell companies, phone logs proving coordination between Diana and Angela, affidavits from 5 previous victims who'd lost a combined total of $142 million to the exact same scam. This is harassment. Angela sputtered. We don't have to listen to these accusations. Actually, Vincent said, pulling out his phone. Under Texas law, you do, because I've been recording this entire conversation, and everything you've said here today can be used as evidence in both civil and criminal proceedings. Diana's carefully constructed mask finally shattered completely. You self-righteous bastard, she hissed at me. Your son was nothing special, just another mark with daddy issues and a trust fund. There it is, I said quietly. The truth. Thank you for that confession. They ran, actually fled the building like the criminals they were, Angela's heels clicking frantically on the polished concrete as they raced for the exit. 2 days later, Diana made her final mistake. She filed a lawsuit against Nathan for breach of promise to marry, demanding $1.5 million in damages. It was a desperate attempt to salvage something from her failed con, but it backfired spectacularly. We had recordings of Diana and Angela discussing their scam, laughing about previous victims, calling Nathan weak and easy to manipulate. The judge not only dismissed Diana's lawsuit, but awarded us $24,500 in attorney fees and court costs. More importantly, the Texas Attorney General's office filed criminal charges, wire fraud for using electronic communications to defraud victims across state lines, organized criminal activity for operating a continuing criminal enterprise. Diana got 12 years in federal prison. Angela got 15 years because of her prior fraud convictions from the 1990s. They'll both be paying restitution to all 6 victims for the rest of their lives, a total of $1.44 million plus interest and penalties. Nathan's doing well now. He's dating a teacher named Sarah, who thinks spending $2 million on a wedding is completely insane and suggested they go camping instead. He looks healthier, like a weight's been lifted from his shoulders. You saved my life, Dad, he told me last week over dinner. I was so deep in that mess, I couldn't see a way out. You saved yourself, I replied. That note you passed me at lunch, that took courage. After Nathan left that evening, I sat in my study with a glass of scotch, looking at the $24,500 check Diana had been court-ordered to pay us. It represented more than money. It represented justice, accountability, the system working when someone knows how to work it properly. When someone demands $2 million over Sunday lunch, they should remember this. There might be someone at the table who spent nearly 4 decades learning to recognize a con when he sees one. Someone who knows that real love doesn't come with a price tag and a payment plan. Diana Stevens learned that lesson the hard way, and she'll have 12 years behind bars to think about it. As for me, I've got antique legal texts to restore and a son who's finally learned to trust his instincts. Because protecting family isn't just about love, it's about using every skill you've earned over a lifetime. Deanna thought she was dealing with just another wealthy father who'd write a check to keep the peace. She never imagined she'd picked a fight with someone who'd spent 38 years putting people exactly like her behind bars. The lesson here isn't complicated. When someone demands your money before they've earned your trust, that's not love talking. That's greed wearing a pretty dress and a practiced smile. Trust your gut when it comes to family. If something feels wrong, it probably is. And never be afraid to ask the hard questions, even if they make Sunday lunch uncomfortable. The best inheritance you can give your children isn't money. It's teaching them to recognize when someone's trying to take advantage of their good heart.